Again, want to thank everyone for being here today. This is the, oh gosh, I had counted, I think fourth, yes, the fourth session, sponsored by farmers in partnership with SVP on leadership development. Want to thank all of you individually for taking time to invest in yourself and in SPP and joining us in today's conversation. Really excited. In fact, I think this is one that I have been most looking forward to. Candid conversations led by Sarah and Laura, and just, I won't introduce them because Kathy, you'll do such a great job. But just want to thank both of you for your time and effort in investing in SVP. And Kathy, as always, thank you so much for making the magic work. So thank you all. So appreciative of farmers and each and every one of you.
Thank you so much, Kyle. So it's so great to see all the familiar faces at this point back. This is session 4. To echo what Kyle said, I'm super excited for you guys. This is the most practical, hands-on program that you're going to be able to walk away, and it's going to change your life, I think, certainly change your job. So I'm only going to be with you briefly today. I'm just going to introduce Laura and Sarah because you're going to be in great hands, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about them. So Laura, and I don't know exactly how many years they've been at Farmers, but they are both from Michigan. They work out of our Grand Rapids office. Is that 19? How many, Laura? She's
You're muted, babe.
It was 8. 19
8 years.
8 and a half.
And Sarah's at, I can't.
15.
16.
15.
Oh, 16.
Oh, yeah.
So lots of years at Farmers, but to tell you something special about them, Laura leads our people leader center of excellence. So she is responsible for all of the learning, leadership development, and culture for our people leaders. So all this work we've been doing with you is really in her sweet spot. She is amazing, and you're going to see some great stuff from her. I think she's going to play mostly the producer role today, but I think she's going to probably facilitate a little bit as well. And then Sarah Remsburg, you guys are in for such a treat. I don't even really know how to introduce Sarah. She is a master facilitator. She and I partner up on a lot of programs, but there is no one like her. I really don't even know what else I need to say. But I just want to let you know, you guys have got 2 of our most amazing facilitators talking about content that I think is going to hit really home for you. And I'm going to be checking back with them to see how things go and how what happens here may impact future sessions. But I just want to say, Sarah, Laura, take it away. Thanks for being here.
Hey, no pressure, right? Thank you so much, Kathy. Wow. And Kyle, and thank you to all of you for, this is just one of those, I feel like I'm getting the best deal because I get to spend time talking with folks about what is, well, yeah, this topic that we'll talk about today is at the foundation of everything I teach as a leadership development and a professional development facilitator. So life-changing, I mean, that's up to you. I'm not going to ask you to necessarily change. What I will tell you is when I was reading about and learning about this topic about 14 years ago now, it was one of those books where I just, like, my husband came out to say, what are you doing? Because I was just like, oh my gosh, oh yes, oh woo! So very excited to get to share it with you. Let me think about what I want you to know. Okay, we are recording the session, so you'll have all this information available on demand. You're also more than welcome. Sometimes people just like want something. You can screen snap any of these slides. They are prepared for you and to be used by you however you like. So if you just got to have something right now, by all means, feel free to do that. Candid conversations, crucial conversations. I'd like to get us started right away with a worksheet. And so I have a worksheet that you're going to be able to complete as we move through the sections. And the last thing that we're going to do today is have you get to go back to all the pieces and parts that you've put together. And what you'll end up having is a prepared, thoughtful, crucial or candid conversation that you can take right into your next challenging discussions. So that is my commitment to you. It sounds like I've heard that you're a very interactive group. So this is going to go wonderfully today. I am here because I study this, not because I know everything about it. And I'll probably share some stories with you that show the things I've learned the hard way. So I am not the only person who has experience with tough discussions, and I'm certainly not the only one who's figured out a few things that work well. So I'm not here to tell you things necessarily that I don't think you already know. We're going to look at some of the things that we know and put them in the context of some of our more challenging discussions. So the link that you see in chat, it is to a handout or a worksheet. You may have already received this just a few moments ago as an email attachment. This is form fill. You are welcome to use it or not use it. And what you'll find is, I think it's a one-page series of questions. Don't worry right now if you understand what the questions are asking. That series of questions aligns to the flow of skills and ideas that we're going to cover. So we'll take time every now and again, but if you're, as you're taking notes, feel free to use that. And here's what I'd like you to do individually. I just want you to take a moment to think about a conversation that you're either avoiding or really messing up. I'm not going to tell me, but I want you to think about what comes to mind when I ask you about someone typically who is quite irritating, quite frustrating. You don't really know how to work with this person, or perhaps you've been trying to have dialogue, give feedback, engage in some tough conversations. I believe, if I'm using the term, of course I closed it, it's constructive discontent. Who's that person for you? You probably have plenty. I know I do. Just pick one. I want you to get that in mind, because everything we talk about today is going to be in the service of, if you choose to, you could go ahead and take all of this out and apply it to that conversation. So I will continue to bring you back to your example. So when I refer to your example, I'm talking about your own personal situation, conversation, relationship that, boy, if you could find a way to have really effective discussions about some tough issues, you know that the relationship would improve and that things would in general become more productive. I invite you to use the chat feature to communicate with us throughout today's session. I'll pause frequently to find out what questions or ideas you have. You don't have to hold your questions until then. So as you have a question or have an idea or have something from your own experience that helps to illustrate one of the things we're looking at, send that right along into chat. Laura's going to keep track of those for me. So feel free to use the chat as the best way to communicate. I can see all of your faces as well. So if you'd rather speak verbally, you can kind of wave your hand at me and I will eventually catch that, or Laura will, and we'll get you off mute. All right, I think that covers enough about how to be successful and what to expect. Let's take a look at the agenda just to give you an idea of the flow that we're going to follow. So we are going to start with self-awareness. I know that you got to talk about emotional intelligence a little bit in some of your prior sessions. So we're going to use that same language and that same idea to think about, what do we need to be aware of going into some of these tough discussions. I'm going to show you how to get your head right. You choose if you want to do it or not, but we're going to talk about what is really going on in our own brain in these crucial conversations, and I think we'll find some insight into, oh, that's why I keep messing it up, or that's why I keep avoiding it. We're going to spend some time looking at a feedback model, the situation, behavior, result, feedback model. You'll do some practice exercises with that. That's going to help you prepare that little core of the conversation. And then we'll look at inviting dialogue, and we'll put a lot of the other pieces for constructive conversation around that. I'm going to dive right in. My goal is to have you spend more time talking and in your breakout groups than I do. That is one of my personal and professional development goals, and I've got Laura here to keep me honest. So I'm going to step through the content, not like super speed fast and leave your mind spinning, but if it feels like I'm just kind of getting to the surface or just touching on these concepts, I am. Because I want you to know just enough about them so that when you go to your breakouts and you do your practice, those things are familiar. This is why I also encourage you to send in your questions or comments at any point. Okay, so what is a candid conversation, a crucial conversation? We're looking for 3 things to be present. It's a conversation where there's different opinions, people have a high stake in the outcome, and there is a strong emotion. Where do we go for lunch? Probably not a crucial conversation. How do we tell Sarah that she can't keep using the corporate credit card to take her family out to dinner? That's a crucial conversation, and that's one that a lot of people would avoid. Me being Sarah, not the Sarah in your group, me being Sarah there. I love this line. A crucial conversation leaves us in a situation where it's the void created by our failure to communicate is filled right in with poison, drivel, and misrepresentations. We're going to talk about that being stories and how good we are at telling stories. So what's so important about it? What merits us spending this much time in our really busy days for you to take some time and grow in this area? So what is so important about these discussions? What we know is we're stuck. We're not achieving the results that we want. We're not in a variety of areas, and I'm not saying you specifically, but I think we can all relate to this. We've got challenging relationships, challenging within our team and without the workplace as well. And so the solution is to look to identify the crucial conversations, the few conversations that when they're held well are going to lead to a significant improvement in relationship, productivity, performance, whatever your set goal is for engaging in these discussions. So we are just not good. We are not good at this. And so let's talk about why are we so bad? Now, this is where Laura's going to be on high alert. We're diving into my favorite part of my favorite topic, which is the brain science. So I want to give you just a little bit about what's going on in your own mind. That's going to help with that self-awareness. And also, I want to make it okay for you to know that, yeah, this stuff is hard. No one says it's easy. I'm not coming in to say that this is easy. Here's some of the things that we are up against. We're really bad at this because if you were to look at the way that, like, as a product, we are designed, we're not designed well to handle that hard conversations. When our discussions turn from like routine to a crucial conversation, that's when we find ourselves in trouble. And it's because emotions don't prepare us to talk effectively. Genetic shaping has led us to respond to social threats with the same level of aggression, essentially, or kind of threat response that we would to a life-threatening situation. Our brain does not perceive a difference between a stalking tiger and an opinionated coworker. It responds to both as life or death threats. Now, we needed this. We needed this because there was a time where if we were out and we were walking around and we looked up and saw a tiger charging at us and a rainbow in the sky, our survival was predicated on getting away from the tiger. So we needed to have this response in our brain. Our brain hasn't caught up yet to the fact that we are not typically being chased by tigers. And so when we feel like someone's disrespecting us, we freak out just as much. We also know that the brain perceives a social threat as pain the same way that it perceives physical pain. And so crucial conversations really put us at our worst. They put us into a fight, flight, or freeze, or you could say attack, avoid, or just run away. This is that reptilian brain. And so it's really good at getting us away from tigers, not helpful when it comes to the modern office setting. And so we are going to look at how do we use that information and how do we get good at dialogue? And so, you know, dialogue's a big word. And I wanted to just set us up quickly about when I'm saying dialogue, what is the goal? What are we going for? I love thinking about it in this way, and I didn't come up with it, so it's not like I love my own graphic. But you can take a look here. Our goal for dialogue, when we are feeling threatened, we're avoiding a conversation or we're attacking back, being defensive in a conversation. And you can see that represented in the dark blue circle. The next circle in is when we move into a place of safety. Now, again, safety is a really big word as well. You could just think about safety as it's okay for me to try and get it wrong. in this conversation. It's okay because this other person has my best interest in mind as well. So safety is what we start to feel when we de-escalate from that fight or flight or threat response. The goal of dialogue is to share meaning. And one of the things that's really important for us to remember when we're talking about challenging discussions, because remember, it's differing opinions and strong emotions. We absolutely have a perspective, a valid perspective. We go wrong when we mistake a perspective for the perspective. So when we're looking for things like innovation, when we're looking for things like continuous improvement, if only one set of perspective is being contributed to that shared meaning, we're getting a very narrow part of what we have available to us. And so when we're talking about dialogue, our ultimate goal, yes, is to have good relationships, to be productive, but all of that is in the service of creating a safe space for us to share our perspectives and our meaning. And out of that space is where we do get much better ideas, much more innovation, and where we're all able to grow with and alongside each other. I just want to touch quickly on emotional intelligence. We're not going to do the whole thing again because I know you talked about it in your communicating to influence with our colleague Amanda. We are going to lean very heavily on the self-awareness part. Crucial conversations, I got to tell you, spoiler alert, the best and really only way to change what someone else is doing, to change what you're doing. And in order to do that, you got to figure out what you're contributing and what's getting in your own way. So we'll be talking quite a bit about self-awareness. We will talk a little bit more on, well, how do I regulate myself? And then at the end, I'll give you just a few tips on how do you monitor others. I purposely chose to focus on self-awareness because I know from experience, we all have plenty of work to do for ourselves coming into a conversation. So as I said, we're about to start with self-awareness, and I want to pause. I know that we've been zipping right along. I'd like to pause for just a moment and find out about questions that you might have, things that I forgot to tell you. I challenge me. You don't have to take everything I'm saying like I'm serving it on a big wooden spoon. I'm sharing ideas. I would, if you're thinking like, oh yeah, but you don't really understand, that's not going to work here. I'd love if we could get into some dialogue about that. So let me know through chat if you have a question about things like what is a crucial conversation? Why are we so bad at it? What does it mean that we're wired to be at our best when we need to be, at our best when we need to be, oh my gosh, at our worst when we need to be at our best. Speaking of at our worst. Any questions, you can send those into chat. You can wave at us. Laura's going to get you off mute if you'd like to.
Yep, absolutely. So one other thing that I'd like to mention too, if you do not feel comfortable sending it to everybody in chat, you're welcome to use a drop-down box. That happens quite a bit when Sarah and I are facilitating with each other. They have a specific situation or they're not sure if it's what they consider as a dumb question. And so they don't want to ask it out loud. So you are more than welcome to click that drop-down box and click on Laura Sandera and send it in to me. And I will just say, hey, we had a private chat come in. Again, that happens all the time with us. So feel free to do that. And I'm just looking to see if I have anybody waving. Don't see anybody waving yet.
I don't see anyone waving at us either. So let's keep rocking and rolling. We are just going to spend a quick moment setting up this start with self-awareness. So I touched a little bit on how the reason these are so challenging, the reason that we all have conversations that we're avoiding or that we can think of like, oh man, if I could have a do-over on that, I really blew it. The reason that these are so hard, and just to keep going with that self-awareness, we're going to use our self-awareness to do, just like you talked about in communicating to influence, we're going to monitor what's happening and what's going on. Awareness is not simply self, but also awareness. I'd like to give you a few pieces of information that may help you expand your awareness of what's really happening inside your brain and inside your body in that moment where you're having a fine conversation in a meeting and then someone says, you know what, I completely disagree and I think you're wrong. What happens in that moment when we're at our worst? So we talked about our brain does not help us. What's really happening is the way our brain is designed is to perpetuate the species and to protect our species. And so when we are under threat, which remember, brain unfortunately does not yet know that someone making a face at you is not the same as someone trying to kill you. It takes all of the blood, all of the oxygen, and just pumps it into our arms, our extremities, and prepares us to either curl up and run away or fight and fight back against that threat. So that means you get less energy, less blood going to that front part of your brain. And that is what you need in order for these crucial conversations to work. So essentially, when we feel under threat, which you could say when we feel defensive, the very part of our brain that we need in order to be successful is the first thing that shuts down in order to help us survive from that perceived threat. So the reason I think that's so important is because when we can understand that our brain is protecting us, I call this the lizard brain or the reptilian brain, our brain is protecting us and our bodies. And the goal is not to change that. That's going to take a long time for that wiring to ultimately change. Our goal is to catch that moment when this part gets overridden or shut down and this part kicks in. And there's lots of ways that our body tells us that that's happening. We can start to notice early indicators that our body or our mind is factoring or working with a threat response or a perceived threat. Once we get more aware of what our own brains and bodies are doing in the early response to when we're starting to feel defensive or starting to feel like, boy, this conversation just turned rough, the sooner we're able to catch it and get back on track. And just like most things, if a conversation is going poorly, the sooner you can catch it and get back on track, the easier it is to get back on track. So I'm going to ask you, I'll give you one example, just so you kind of know, like, what even is she asking me to do? But I'm going to ask you to send in via chat, raise your hand, come off mute if you'd like. And I want to think about what are some of the signals, feelings, thoughts, physiology that we experience when we feel threatened or when we feel like we're being disrespected or we feel defensive. So I know for me, the thing that I'm always watching for, it doesn't take much, when there's more in here than is coming out here. So when I'm talking more to myself about the conversation than I am engaging in the conversation, I recognize that, you know what? This conversation went crucial and I have a chance to get it back online. And then there's also, thank you so much, John. Hot feeling and increased heart rate, hot feeling in our face, sweaty palms. Absolutely, Kathy was so right. I can count on this group to not leave me hanging. What else do you notice? What does it feel like? Maybe what are some of the thoughts? A thought might be, how dare you? Tensing, definitely. Shoulders up, closer my shoulders are to my ear. It's kind of like I'm trying to pull back into it. Frustration, anger, our motives often switch. So this is another part of crucial. You can prepare, and we're going to teach you how to prepare. But you also have to remember that at any moment a conversation can go off those rails and you need to get it back on. So you're looking for these in the moment too. Stuttering, difficulty getting my thoughts in order. And now that we know what we know about the brain, that makes sense. We don't have the part of our brain that puts our thoughts in order. So at least know that we come by this honestly. I feel threatened. Yes, I might avoid it. I might hold back some of my ideas, either to punish them by not telling them all my great ideas or because I don't feel safe sharing that idea. Sometimes we hide behind humor and we deflect. It's not about knowing, I mean, these are some wonderful examples. These are all things that you can watch for. The way that I figured out how to do this is I kind of had to look back. So it's really hard to do it in the moment, but I have plenty of opportunities to look back on blown conversations. And so that's when I look back and think, let me run that tape again in my head. What was happening? What did I feel? And that is how I learned to really start monitoring for those signs that safety is at risk. People, yes, thank you. There's a reason I asked you to start by thinking about one of the more frustrating folks, or one of those conversations that you're avoiding, or has already gone poorly. Because yes, the behavior of other people is definitely going to send us into these. That's really what this is all about. And I'll put a finer point on that. It's really the story we tell ourselves about what other people are doing. Now, Laura, I did see a question come in. Is it something that we should swoop back and grab right now?
I think we can save it towards, this is the
Okay.
question. Yeah, I have it written down for
Okay.
we can dip into it since you're on a roll.
All right, thank you so much. Keep the questions coming. So you shared with us a number of early warning signs that safety is at risk. These are highly personal. It's your responsibility to monitor, to practice that self-awareness, really think about what am I feeling, what's going on in my body, and then how can I use those to help me move more quickly to the next section, which is getting our heads right. So, and really it's getting our hearts right as well, but we need to get our head right. If it's diverted and we're responding with essentially the same equipment that a crocodile would have in a crucial conversation, how do we get those higher functioning things back online, which we can do quite simply actually, so that we are able to engage from the place that we truly want to for a conversation. Most of us don't go into a conversation hoping that we blow it and the other person walks away feeling less than. So how do we get back after the hijack? How do we get ourselves back on track after that threat response sends all of our energy to that back part of our brain? Here's a hack for the brain. The brain loves questions. We're going to look at some questions for grounding. Whenever your brain encounters a question, it has to divert back to your prefrontal cortex, is what we call this front part. And so the fastest way, when I notice one of my signs that safety is at risk, or I'm starting to say more in my head than I am out loud, is I have go-to questions. And that forces my brain to come back and realize, oh, okay, so if we're being curious right now, we're probably not being eaten. So maybe it's okay and we can engage with some of our more helpful equipment in our brain. So when you find yourself in a hijack, here's a few things to help you get yourself back on track in order to get the outcome and the goal that you want. In the context of the conversation, not just in general, but in the context of the conversation, whether you're preparing for it or you're in the middle of it and it starts to go off the rails, ask, you know, what do I want for myself in this situation? And what do I want for the other person? What do I want for the relationship? And then here's the hard part. How would I behave if I truly wanted those results? So let's say Laura and I are chatting and something happens and I start to feel very defensive and I notice that I'm telling a lot more stories in my head than I'm sharing. My pause right there is, wait, okay, I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling defensive. What do I want for this conversation and for myself? Well, I know I don't want to walk away feeling frustrated and defensive. And so now I'm able to reconnect to what is my actual goal for these conversations. This is something I'm going to invite you to do as well in your worksheet as we go along. You don't need to do it right now. But it's uncanny how quickly a simple question, even if you don't know the answer, can get you back online and bring you back those pieces that you need. Okay, now let's talk about how we make meaning of things. Let's get curious. This is something you are going to practice right after this, so you'll have a chance to go out and engage with this one, because this to me is the kicker. This is a big change. So I know that in communicating to influence, you learned a little bit more about making a message meaningful and getting attention, how to grab that attention, give a clear message, give a compelling message. Now we're going to go to that next level and really think about what's happening between when I communicate my message and someone else hears it, or between when I see something happen and I act on it. You've probably heard what else was I going to do? I couldn't help myself. I just yelled. There was nothing I could do. Not true. Let's take a look at what's really happening. We see or observe something. Our brain needs to make meaning of it. Brains hate uncertainty. So I see something happen and my brain tells a story or interprets what just happened and what it means. That generates an emotion, which I then act on. I'm going to go through an example here so we can start to see why knowing this process helps us unravel and kind of work our way back to, okay, maybe I did get a little hijack there. So the first thing is what we see. Something happens. And in this example, we're going to talk about a boss who's just breathing down your neck, over your shoulder, really just doing some stuff that's frustrating you. So the situation that's happening is your boss has asked you 3 times this week for an update. You just got another email asking how it's going. You have a faster way to do this, which you've told your boss. So you could have had it done earlier, but your boss wants you to follow the original process. Now they're standing over your shoulder and asking how it's coming along. All of these are factual observations. These are things that happened. These are not where the problem comes in. It's the jump to the next step, the story that we tell. And if I have any Brene Brown fans in the room, she does a lot of work in the room with the stories that we tell ourselves as well. So this might sound familiar. So all we know is our boss has been following up pretty assertively on this project. Here's some of the things that we might tell ourselves. And we don't do it. It's not like we sit back and think, how could I interpret this? This just, our brain does it for us. And it feels lightning fast. We might feel like, my boss just must not trust me to get it right. The boss wants me to do extra work instead of my new process because he doesn't understand what I'm trying to do. He hasn't paid attention to everything else I do, and he's micromanaging me. Now, if this is how we choose to interpret what and why your manager or your leader is doing, that's going to lead to some pretty specific feelings. So based on how you interpret something, you're going to then have an emotion about it. Emotions are real. I don't think you're thinking they're made up. We are not thinking creatures who sometimes have emotions. We're emotional beings who sometimes think. And so whether we're aware of it or not, as you learn from emotional intelligence, emotions are running the show. Something happens. We try to fill in, why did that happen? And then we have feelings, frustrated, anger, stressed, clenched jaw, basically a lot of those things that we had talked about earlier. So these feelings, these emotions lead us to motion, and we act. And we do things like, let's see here, tell the boss you're working on it as fast as you can, sigh, roll your eyes, stop seeking feedback, since he clearly doesn't have a clue anyway. And you can see some of the other things that we may be led to do. Now, you do not need to own this, but I can tell you that this story was written from my lived experience. This is my story. Some details changed to protect the innocent. The place that we have a choice to get a different outcome, the place I'm going to ask you to really do some practice on in just a moment, is the step that happens between seeing and hearing and telling ourselves the story, or telling ourselves about why this is happening. Usually this is a completely subconscious process. So part of the work here is to bring that to our awareness. We're going to do some practice with that. Before we do that, I want to show you why. So we're on this trajectory. Our boss is asking us for an update. We feel like the reason it's happening is they don't trust us. So now we're frustrated and irritated and defensive. And so we roll our eyes, shrug our shoulders, and disengage from the leader. You want to ask yourself whenever you have the luxury, if this was left on its current trajectory, how is it going to play out? And now we're going to look at this. What flaws might there be in the story I'm telling myself? What might the boss's story be? And then how can you reframe the story? And this is where you're going to help me. Before I ask you to do this in some small breakout groups, let's just do this quick example together. You can chat in, raise your hand, whichever one you want to do. What might be some other explanations for what we're seeing and hearing? What might be some other ways to explain why our manager is being quite active in following up for and asking for this information?
Because her manager is asking for the information.
That could very well be. Thank you. Any other things? The boss wants the info. All right. So yeah. And that's one that if and when you make that tiny little reframe, and there's plenty more, you're going to do a competition here, not competition. There's plenty more ways we could reframe it, but how does that change everything else in the process? Now yes, the same things are happening, but instead of it being because your boss doesn't trust you and doesn't know anything, we have empathy because it's, oh, you know what? I bet Laura's on her to get this done. That leads to different feelings. That leads to different actions. We have a choice in how we feel and respond. It's just, we have to be really conscientious to find that choice. Now, we're going to have you head into some breakout groups. And you have a mission. You're going to be in smaller groups. And Laura just put a link into a document that you'll be able to use through all your breakout activities. So we're just doing the activity on that first page, breakout activity 1. There are 3 different everyday scenarios included in your breakout activity instructions. Your task with your team is to choose one, whichever one resonates with you or that you want to play with. I want you to first come up with what would your original story be, and then I want you to come up with as many alternative stories as you possibly can. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. They don't have to be like bound by reason. So I don't want you to feel like, well, could we actually do that within our time frame? I just want you to think about what might be going on that's causing this to happen other than this person being an absolute jerk. What else could be happening? So you're going to work in groups of 3. I believe you're pretty familiar with Zoom breakouts by now. We've been using them from some other programs, but just to remind you, you'll just automatically show up in your breakout when you click yes. You'll get the invite to go. Your video will go with you. You'll be able to hear the folks in your breakout. You have space in your handout to capture your ideas, or someone can just jot them down. When we come back to the main room, we're just going to do some quick sharing on who can come up with some of those more creative explanations for what else might explain this, if it's not that this person is a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad person. Raise your hand if you have a question about what you're going to be doing. I'm giving you 5 minutes. That gives you a minute to get in, get settled, pick the scenario, 3 minutes for rapid fire brainstorm, and then an extra minute because things never go perfectly. Thanks, Tracy. Not everybody gets that. That's from Alexander, right? Okay, everyone, off we go to breakouts. You have your instructions. We'll pull you back when it's time, and you're going to come back and tell us all the different explanations you could come up with. We'll see you in 5.